Today we're going to start by drawing the first piece of our 1-inch cube. And it's going to be based off of this drawing. So I'm going to go to my desktop and open up my Inventor program. I'm going to click New, Standard Part. I'm going to create that. Now, before I start drawing ever, I want to make sure I go to Tools, Document Settings, Units, and I always want to make sure that I'm in inches. If you start drawing before this, you won't be able to modify it. So you want to make sure that you're drawing in inches. I'm going to press close. Now I'm going to go back to 3D Model, and I'm going to start my sketch. So I'm going to click my green plus button. These are our different drawing planes. They're also known as the origins. So I have XY, YZ, and XZ. Right now it doesn't matter what plane you choose. I'm going to choose XZ because I'm drawing the top of my full assembly. So I'm going to come in here. Here are some basic drafting tools. We're going to start with a rectangle. We're going to use 2-point center. And I'm going to use the origin point as the center of my rectangle. So right now I've clicked. It's still an active tool. And I'm going to press 1 tab on my keyboard and 1. And that's going to allow me to draw my 1-inch cube. Or square. If you missed any of those steps or you clicked previously, I'm just going to grab all this. I'm going to grab my rectangle. If you just drew a square that wasn't the right size, we can also come in and dimension this. So I can make it 1 by 1. But if you look here, that can modify where that origin is. So to make it easier, I would suggest grabbing your 2-point center, rectangle, grabbing your origin, and it's 1 tab 1. And that's going to give us our first square. Now, our rectangle tool is still active. I can see because it's highlighted. I'm going to grab that same origin, and I'm going to do 1/2 inch. So 0.5, tab, 0.5, enter. You're going to hear me saying what the different keyboard tools that I'm using are, because it's going to be very specific. So next I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm going to start at the top of my 0.5 square. So I'm going to click, and that's going to activate my line tool. So I'm going to come over to the right 1/8 or 0.125. Now, right now you can see it's set to 90 degrees, which is what I want. Occasionally, your mouse will move and it'll be off. So I can just press tab, just like I was with the square, to change this and change it to 90 degrees. So that way it's where I want it to be. Now I need to create that angle that we saw on the drawing, and I know it was 60 degrees. But if you look, 60 degrees is going to go in the wrong direction. So we need to make sure it's 60 from here, or 60 from here out. So I have to do a little bit of math, and I know that it's going to be 180 because the 60 is from here, so this is 180 minus 60 degrees. So I'm going to press tab. It's 120, tab, and then it locks it into that angle, but I can still change the length of that line. And it's going to want to snap to the edge of the 1-inch square. So I'm going to click, and my line tool is still active. I'm going to come back to the beginning. So we're going to do that so that way this half of one side is on both sides. So I'm going to start again from my top of my square. I'm going to come over 1/8. And then I need it to be that same 60 degrees. So if this is 80, I'm going to subtract 60 and make it 120. And then I'm just going to snap that to the end of the 1-inch square and then close that. So now I have that entire shape. So let's go ahead and do that from the bottom. what I just used, and you saw that hand show up, I'm panning the view. So I'm not moving anything within the drawing, but I'm moving where I'm viewing. And that's especially helpful, especially if I have to zoom in to see anything. So to zoom, I'm using my scroll wheel like a scroll wheel. And to pan, I'm going to use my scroll wheel as a button. And that's going to allow me to move what I'm seeing on my screen. So I'm going to grab my line tool, start at the bottom of my half-inch square. I'm going to come over 1/8, 0.125, and then I'm going to come at that 60-degree angle. Remember, we have to do a little bit of math, so I know that it's going to be 120. So tab 120, tab, and then I'm going to click at the end of my square. And I'm just going to come in and close that shape. Your shape has to be closed for us to do the next step and extrude it. So I'm going to start here, come over 0.125. I need to go at 120 degrees. So tab 120, tab. And it depends how you start that. All of mine thus far I've had to type 120. If you drew a line and then you needed to come back and re-change it, it may change where it's calling 0. And I'll try and give you an example of that on the next side. So I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm going to come up 1/8, and then I'm going to close my tool. Because right now, it was making it so that way that angle was pulling, this was either 90 or 180. So right now, this counts as 0. So now I only need it to be that 60 degrees. So you need to be looking at where it's considering to be 0. And that's what's going to help you about your math. Something else I like here, I'm going to grab that line, this line, and that line I drew at the top. Let's see, can I grab all those? I'm going to grab those 3, and I'm going to mirror them. So I'm going to do that, and then it said to select the mirror line. I'd have to draw that in. Okay, let me show you. So if I were to close this, and then I'm going to select this shape in its entirety, and I can click mirror, mirror line, and apply, I can then duplicate that. So as long as I knew my first side was correct, I then can tell that here from here is 60 degrees. Now it's saying that because I mirrored it, it's going to over constrain my sketch. So I can click accept and it'll put that. If a dimension has parentheses, it's because it's a driven dimension. You can't change that. So for example, it's locked in when I click on it. This one over here, if I needed to, let's say I accidentally made it 62 degrees, that's going to change it. Notice it changed this one too because I mirrored it, so it locked those dimensions together. So let's put this one back at 60, so that way I have that. So we're going to come over here, we're going to do the same step we've been doing. I'm going to try really hard to just teach you as many different ways to do things as I can. So notice it's considering this to be 0, so I need to take 90 and add to that to make that 120. 10, 120. Oh, did you notice I accidentally added it, I clicked out here, I didn't lock it here, so what I'm going to come in and I'm going to trim and I remove the extra. Then I'm going to start my line right there and add to it. Let's see. Problems occurred. So sometimes if we skip steps, that's going to happen. It's going to give us an error. Problems occurred while solving the sketch. Edit sketch. Dimensions. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to do 1/8. I'm going to do a tab 120, tab. I'm going to lock it in, and then I'm just going to come in and close this. So there's the full part of my drawing. If at any point you need to pause, rewind in the video so that way you can go back. So I'm going to click Finish, which is going to remove me from that sketch. If you notice, all of my drawing over here in the model browser is in one layer. I just want to show you an example really quick that I see a lot of times where someone will be trying to draw, and if you look, it's not snapping to the drawing. I can't actually get it perfectly on the corner. What's happening is they're creating part of their drawing overlapping, but those are two separate layers. So if you look, I have sketch 2 and sketch 1. Those are on two different layers. Those do not interact. If I wanted to extrude this part, I'm not going to be able to. It's not a closed shape. So I'm going to right click and press delete. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to press extrude. So that'll give me this pop-up. And I'm going to extrude all the different parts that we just drew for our shape. And then we're going to make this 0.25. And I want to make sure that I have all of my shapes selected. And I can click OK. If you notice, the drawing disappeared. It became what's called a consumed sketch. So you don't ever want to end your part with an unconsumed sketch. They should always be embedded underneath an extrude, a revolve, or another tool. Now that we're three-dimensional, let's come in and save this part. So I'm going to File, Save, and I'm going to name it, so I'm going to say odd2, my username. Odd2 is my block, so if you're in block odd4, even2, whatever block number, your username, and then yellow piece. And I'm just going to press Save. When you're working on the computer, your best bet is to save often, because if anything crashes, something happens, you don't want to have to restart. So now I'm going to come up to Tools, Appearance, and that gives me this pop-up browser, and I'm going to search for yellow. So I'm going to use this kind of yellow wall paint that usually works pretty well. And I'm going to come over into my model browser. I'm going to open Solid Bodies, and I'm going to select Solid 1, and then I'm going to press the Add Appearance. So that's going to change the color of my part. So I just made a change. I'm going to press File and Save. Now we just created a part file, and if I come over here into my U drive, I can show you. Here's the one that we just created. So next we're going to go into File, Print, and I'm just hovering over this, and I'm going to send to 3D Print Service. So I want to make sure it's STL. What I just clicked, I'm going to click on Options, and I want to make sure it's set to binary, millimeter, and high resolution. And then I'm going to click OK, and OK, and it's now going to save it as an STL. Notice I'm in the same folder, it's the same name. All that's changing is that file type, and Inventor wants to do that change for me. So go ahead and press Save. So I just created that STL file. I'm going to show you again. There are going to be lots of file types that we're creating. So here's the two we just created. Now we're going to come up to File, New, and we're going to select a standard DWG. So we're going to create a drawing file, which is what I showed you at the beginning of the video, so that way we can check our dimensions. So right now, the default sheet size, if I come over to Sheet 1, I'm going to right click, Edit Sheet. It defaults to size D sheet paper. So it's 22 inches tall by 34 inches wide. So that is too big. So we're going to come into Custom Size, and we're going to save it as 17 inches tall and 22 inches wide. This is twice the size of standard printer paper. So that way it's very easy to scale down if we need to print it, and it easily saves as a PDF. So I'm going to click OK. And this gives me a nice size. If you needed to create a drawing the same size as printer paper, I can edit sheet. I'm going to change it to size A. That's 8.5 by 11. If you do that, notice your title block becomes too big. So we can always delete this, open drawing resources, open title blocks, and insert the ANSI A title block. But we're not going to do that. So we're going to go back and save it as 17 by 22. So I'm going to come in, we're going to choose our base view. It defaults to that part that's open. But notice this isn't the best front view, so I'm going to change the orientation of this, and I'm going to say, okay, this is my front view. I want it in this lower left-hand corner, but I don't want it in the same space as my title block. So I'm going to bring it just so it's above that. I want to make sure that hidden lines are selected and shaded. We're going to change the scale to be 5:1 because that's going to be what best fits this piece of paper. And I'm going to click OK. So here's my base view. Then we're going to project from there. So I'm going to project from this. I'm going to do a top view, a side view, and an isometric view. So right now it wants to create it. So I'm going to right click, press create, and there are the 4 views of our object. Before we go any further, let's make sure to save this. File, save, 1" cube. It's the same name, it's just the type of file that's going to change. So I'm going to press save. Now we need to add in our dimensions. So we're going to come into annotate and then dimension. So let's start with our right side. So the right side, I'm going to grab this, is 0.25. Okay. And then let's work with the height. So I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to skip this solid line, and I'm going to go to the first dotted line. So that's going to be 0.25. I'm just going to keep working from there. Now, I'm going to stack these, so that way they're equally spaced. So I'm going to keep the same amount of space between each dimension, so that way it looks consistent. Now, we never typed 0.38. So when we create this, we're going to come over to precision and tolerance and change our primary unit to 3 decimal places. So that way it's not rounding. And I'm just going to keep working up from the bottom to our hidden lines until we get all the dimensions we need. So this is going to be the same thing. I'm going to change this to 3 units. I'm going to work up. 0.75 is not rounding, and all the way. Notice it wants to snap where to put that dimension. So we never want to cross our dimension. So for example, I wouldn't want to pull this out. That 0.25 is crossing over other dimensions. The smaller the dimension, the closer to the object it should be. So 0.25 is smaller than 0.375, so it's closer to the object. And we don't want to duplicate. We've already dimensioned this 0.25 from here to here. We don't need to do that again. So I'm going to come over to my front view. What I do need to dimension in my front view is that 60-degree angle that we kept repeating. So I have my dimension tool. I'm looking for a line, but not a dot. So if I click on the dot, it's not going to give me the right type of dimension. So I'm going to click on the line, and I'm going to come down here and I'm hovering. Do you see where it gives me that angle symbol? I'm looking for that. If I click on a dot, it's going to give me a different type of dimension. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab my line, looking for that angle symbol, and then I'm saying, okay, it's 60 degrees. And we're going to click that. Next thing, we're going to duplicate, even though it's not the same, but because this object is symmetrical, we're going to make sure all these dimensions are the same in the width. So I'm going to grab the end, do my 0.25, looking for it to snap. Remember, I need to change the tolerance of anything that's accidentally rounding too much. And I'm still stacking my dimensions, and I'm making sure that I'm not duplicating and I'm not overlapping them. The only dimension here that we can duplicate, and it's not always the case, but today we can, is I'm going to still tell you that over here it's still 0.25. I'm going to click OK. So let's zoom out. And this is a pretty nicely laid out, even. We always put our dimensions in between our views because it's shared between our two views. For example, if I were to move this one up, you notice all of that information is going to be the same. So I'm going to go File, Save. May take a minute. If we come back here, notice we have our drawing file, a part file, and our STL, our standard tessellation language. That's what we would use for 3D printing. We do need to do one more file type. And we're going to go File. And we have two options. I like to go Export PDF. And that's going to grab the same naming convention and save it as a PDF file. So I'm going to press Save. Before I do anything else, I'm going to come over to here, and you can see it could show up as a Google HTML file. It might show up as an Acrobat document. It might show up as something else. But those are all PDFs. I'm going to open this and make sure that I can see everything, and sometimes it zooms too much. So I'm going to close out of this, and that looks good. So these four files, the DWG, the IPT or the part file, the PDF, and the STL, are what I'm attaching to that first Google Classroom assignment. I do not need a temp file. That's only there because it's open in Inventor. If you have any questions, be sure to ask your teacher, and good luck.